From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The title of this episode, Zuckerberg's Wasted Day. The CEO of the social media platform, website, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, appeared before two committees of the Congress on Tuesday. He testified there. We have the transcript from the Washington Post. Now, what this is all basically about is Facebook. There was much ado to be made about Zuckerberg's age at 33 or whatever it is. And many of the senators that are in their 70s and 80s, it doesn't really matter. The actual legislation would be written by people much younger, and in the Congress they have people with expertise in the matter. So this whole argument that the monopoly media is making here about Facebook is nothing more than flummery, and you have to understand what's going on here. And from the transcript we understand the Facebook model. It's basically an ad house. Their whole idea is to throw as many ads on you and suck as much blood out of society as is humanly possible. That is all it is. Now, controls there to within Facebook to alleviate some of the problems. Yes, they are, but most of the people really don't bother to deal with them. And this third-party situation there with the Cambridge Analyticas, etc. of the world. If you notice, various applications that you sign on to will use a Facebook application as an entryway. You should never do that unless that is literally the only option. And there are other options there also to use as gateways. Use an email address if you can. This eliminates some of the problem. But what is happening with Facebook and what has happened with Facebook is a wider discussion, and not only a wider discussion, a crisis in public confidence. There was a movement at one time to build an open source Facebook, and it should be rekindled, and people should invest the time in doing it. Now, how would it be sustained? It would have to be sustained strictly by donations and our donated space in data centers. Facebook has many data centers. We'll talk about one in a very small town. And they're all over the U.S. and all over the world. They have, 25,000 workers now. A large enterprise. But it's all based on ads. And once you get into an ad cycle, it's like anything else. Newspapers historically ran a few ads because they were confined to print. And then we have TV ads, radio ads, etc. Get as many ads in there as possible if there's anything to sell. Of course, ads are based on demand. And we have software that can alleviate some of the ads from Facebook. If you go to Mozilla, you will find these third-party solutions that will solve some of your problems. In an open source report, we'll go over some of those solutions shortly here. Hopefully this week we'll get to that. But beyond the actual technical problem, there is an economic problem and a privacy problem. The privacy problem is very, very important. Now, can it be fixed by the Facebooks of the world? The answer there is absolutely not. Legislation is needed. And the monopoly media would have you believe, again, that due to the age of some of the lawmakers, they could not fix this. That is obviously false. It can be fixed. Legislation can be written. They would bring in people with expertise in social media. That's not the problem. The problem is the ads. The ads can be controlled. Changing of the business model. If you go to the transcript, we will place it here. You can go through it. But the question asked there, I think it was by one of the people at the Facebook Cheryl, whatever her last name is, that they would have to charge people not to be included in this ad fiasco. In other words, change their business model. If they have $1 billion people, they could charge $1 and make $1 billion, or $2 and make $2 billion. You get the simple arithmetic there. It's not something out of the way. But beyond that, the change of the business model can be forced by government regulations. And to let these types of social media go out there without being regulated is folly. And this was what Zuckerberg was trying to get around. That's why the whole day was absolutely wasted. There was absolutely nothing going on there other than him appearing there and apologizing. Apologies are not going to help. There are civil suits now going on, and those will eventually be settled. In out of the discovery process there, we will find out more about these machinations involving Facebook. Let me just go to a little bit of the transcript here. Well, opinion Zuckerberg senators, people have control over what their information is used in the ad product today. So if you want to have an experience now, you notice where ads aren't triggered, use all the information that we have available. You can turn off third-party information. What we found is, even though some people don't like the ads, people really don't like ads that aren't relevant to them. And while there are some discomforts for sure with using information and making ads more relevant, the overwhelming feedback we get from our community is that people would rather have us show relevant comment than not. I'd like to see him prove that. We offer this control that you're referring to. Some people use it, a majority on, but not a majority on Facebook. What about, as Cheryl was saying, was in order not to run ads at all, we would need some sort of business model. Nelson, this is Senator Nelson of Florida. That is your business model. So I take it that, and I use harmless examples of chocolate, but if it got into more a personal thing, communicating with friends, I want to cut it off. I'm going to have to pay you in order not to send me using my personal information, anything I don't want. This is essentially what I understand. Sandberg was her name. Said, is that correct? Yes. Senator, although to be clear, we don't offer an option today for people to pay their way literally out of it, because we want to offer free service that everyone can afford. Well, that is a problem within itself. Now, therefore, you consider my personal information identifiable data that the company data, not my data. Is that correct? No, actually, the first line of our terms of service says that you control and own the information and content you put on Facebook. Well, all these services say that, but in reality, no. Well, the recent scandal is obviously frustrating, not only because it affected 87 million, that's only an approximation. More than likely, it affected more than 87 million because it seemed to be part of a pattern of lax data presses by the company going back years. So back in 2011, it was a settlement with the FTC, and now we discover yet another incident where data was failed to be protected. When you discovered that Cambridge Analytica that had fraudulently obtained all this information, why didn't you inform those 87 million? Well, we learned in 2015 that Cambridge Analytica had bought data from an app developer on Facebook that people had shared it with it, and we did take action. We took down the app. We demanded that both the app developer and Cambridge Analytica delete and stop using data that they had, which was a fairy tale. Yes, and we should have followed up and done a full audit. Well, that was deliberate. Had they done a full audit, other app developers would not have been involved with Facebook. Yes, you did that, and you apologized for it, but you didn't notify them, and you didn't think that you had an ethical obligation to notify the 87 million users. Senator, we heard back from Cambridge Analytica that they had told us they weren't using the data and it was deleted. We considered it a closed case. In retrospect, that was a clear mistake. Did someone notify the FTC? No, and that is very, very uncertain. Senator Thune, he's from South Dakota. And Mr. Zuckerberg, would you do you differently today? Presumably that in response to Senator Nelson, which yes, having to do it over again, he lied. So we have made a lot of mistakes by running the company. I think it's pretty much impossible, I believe, to start a company in your dorm room and then grow it in at the scale that we are now without making some mistakes. No doubt about that. Mistakes will be made. But you have to understand that the company has been in business for a decade. For the first 10 or 12 years of the company, I viewed our responsibility as primarily building the tool that if we put those tools in people's hands, then they would empower people to do good things. Well, that in itself is a Pollyannish view of the business world. He should have read Elijah Jordan's Business Be Damned to understand what the ins and outs of business are, to maximize their profits. And this has always been what Facebook has been about, in spite of this petty moralizing they've been engaged in. Thune, I'm glad that you have gotten that message. As we discussed in my office yesterday, the line between legitimate political discourse and hate speech can sometimes be hard to identify, especially when you're relying on artificial intelligence and other technologies for initial discovery. You can discuss what steps Facebook currently takes in that situation. Yes, I speak to hate speech, and I talk about enforcing a content policy. The problem with content policy there is when you start talking about hate speech, particularly on Twitter, and you are looking at the tweets of one DJ Trump. Is DJ Trump engaging in hate speech? A very big question there. For many people, yes. By the end of this year, by the way, we're going to have more than 20,000 people working on security, but they have supposedly 1 billion people out there. Some problems lead themselves easy to AI, that's artificial intelligence solution, than others. No doubt about it. Today, we said here 90% of ISIL and Al-Qaeda content that we took down off of Facebook. Well, yeah, but that was a political decision primarily, not a decision going forward there. Yeah, let me move on here. Right around the time of the 2016 election itself, so since then we in 2018 is an incredibly important year for elections, not just in the U.S. And that's one thing to remember. There are elections in places like India, Brazil, Mexico, Pakistan, and of course in Hungary, the right has already won the election. But when you start basing your election on Facebook, you're having problems within your country to begin with. Because these political models that work in the U.S., they took the cookie cutter model from U.S. political consultants into the British leaving the EU called Brexit. Well, the problem there was that they ran a U.S.-style disinformation program, and of course, Cambridge Analytica played a big role. What the idea was to run a campaign, as with DJ Trump, based on hate. When you have an animus there, it's very easy to run a campaign against foreigners in the country and use a lot of anecdotal and blatantly false information, such as DJ Trump talks about people from Mexico coming here to murder people. Well, people from Russia come here and murder people, people from any country that you can think of, including the indigenous population. We call it urban terrorism, or terrorism within the U.S., where 17 people were brutally slaughtered down in Parkland, Florida. Now, that person did not get on a plane, a boat, or peddle his way into the country across the border in the southwest U.S., i.e. in Arizona, Texas, etc. He was already here. And that's the same thing with Combine. We can go back to many of these mass murderers. So when you use this sort of stuff, that type of content that was mined and put out to the public in Britain for basics, that kind of content would have been not seen in the newspaper. Yes, in political ads it would have, but on Facebook much of this content is put out there not as political ads, but as affinity type ads, quite literally. So that is a very big difference there, because you have Facebook. If Facebook were just a political destination, it'd be totally different, but it is primarily a social media and many times family type media, where people are contacting relatives, friends, chums, etc. on there. Yes, people get political views, as with Boston Red, that is a political site only. It's not a personal site. Do we have some friends that just happen to be there? A few, but not very many, and their personal lives, they generally speaking do not get into the political part of the site. They post personal things about where they are going, trips to Europe, etc. And we don't push our content to them other than to like their content, and that is basically where we are with Facebook. We are literally posting from the Washington Post, from Reuters, the BBC, those kinds of sites, the materials that we're posting. We post very, very little content that we create, except for this broadcast. And broadcasts like it, where it be Numbers Man in the macroeconomic field, the open source report, for the open source media, medium, tech reports, that sort of thing that it covers, and international news under Beyond the World. But those things are posted there. They are not continuously posted there every day, but they are posted there. People even post the death of animals. Sorry to hear that H about the little doggy there. But again, the doggy was an older dog, I assume. But there are current information there. And of course, there's other ways to get current information. And that is, a lot of models have to be changed because, for example, the Washington Post, people that are sharing that information there, and they're subscription based. Now, many of these publications, the subscription base for them would be prohibitive. So if it comes across Twitter from the Post or from the Wall Street Journal, we will put it on a Facebook. Now, can the people access that? Well, perhaps they can access a few sentences. Sometimes they can access it. That needs to be fixed. Now, content within the newspaper that say is not on Twitter, that is different. Now, some of it can get there, but primarily the headlines, like the Zuckerberg transcript here, we assume the Post has done that as a public service. Let me just get back to it here. I won't spend a lot of time on this because you can read it for yourself, but you understand what the hearing is about. Some people refer to them as Stanford Analytica. Let me see. This is Senator Cantwell. She's from Washington State. I've not heard that. Okay, do you have Do you think that Palantir taught Cambridge Analytics, as press reports are saying, how to do these things? Oh, I see. This is somebody from Stanford. And Palantir has even scraped data from Facebook. This in CANTWELL. I'm not aware of that, according to Zuckerberg. Do you think that during the 2016 campaign, as Cambridge Analytica was providing support to the Trump campaign on the Project Alamo, were there any Facebook people involved in sharing the technique and information? Senator, we provided support to the Trump campaign similar to what we provided to any advertiser campaign that asked for it. So in other words, it was all about the ad revenue. CANTWELL, during the campaign, Cambridge Analytica worked for the Trump campaign to refine tactics. Were Facebook workers involved in that? Senator, I don't know that our employees were involved with Cambridge Analytica, although we did help out the Trump campaign overall in sales support. And you understand where this is going. Sales support, technical support, it is a very thin dividing line. CANTWELL, okay, total information awareness was 2003. John Ashcroft and others tried to do similar things to what I think is behind all of this, political forces trying to get data and information to influence the process. Well, when I look at Palantir and what they are doing, I look at WhatsApp, which is another acquisition. I look at where you are, and then the consent decree. Now, this is in 2011, and where you are today. This is CANTWELL. Now, CANTWELL comes from Real Networks, so she does know technology. That broad statement about some senators not knowing technology does not apply to Ms. CANTWELL. CANTWELL, well, I guess given the track record where Facebook is and why you are here today, I guess people would say that they didn't do enough. And the fact that people like Bolton, that is John Bolton, was an inventor in an investor in the New York Times article earlier. I guess last month, that Bolton's PAC was obsessed with how America was becoming a more wimp-wristed and spineless, and it wanted research and messaging for national security issues. Bolton is now in the DJ Trump administration. So the fact that, there are a lot of people who are interested in this larger effect, and what I think my constituents want to know was this discussion discussed at your board meetings, and what are the application and interests that are being discussed without putting a real teeth into this. I think certainly it's worth discussing whether we should do something similar to the U.S. What would you say about it today going forward? Well, Zuckerberg, obviously, like any capitalist, doesn't want any regulation. Do you believe European regulations should apply here in the U.S.? Senator, I think everyone in the world deserves good privacy protection, and regardless of whether we implemented the exact same regulations, I would guess it would be somewhat different because we have somewhat different sensibilities in the U.S. Oh boy, I bet. So the general gist of this whole conversation here is basically about the same. I saw something about Android phones. I had not read the entire transcript here. It's true, as was recently publicized, that Facebook collects calls and text history, of its users that use Android phones. Senator, we have an app called Messenger. H uses this for sending messages to your Facebook friends, and that app offers people an option to sync their text messages into the Messenger app, and it is made so that basically you can have one app where you both text and your Facebook messages on one place. We allow people that option. Can you opt out of that? Yes, you can opt out. But you see, the problem is most people do not opt out of it. So that is where the devil gets in the details. Senator Leahy here, I assume Facebook has been served with subpoenas for the special prosecutor's office. Is that correct? And we'll move. Yes. So the special prosecutor will be, as they say, questioning them. Are you able to confirm whether there are any Russian-created groups? Yes or no, Senator. Are you asking about Pacifics? Yes. Last week we were actually announced major changes to our ad and page policy that will be identifying the identity of every single advertiser. And they're talking about verifying these users. I think that can be gained also, as the chips on these new credit cards can be gained. In other words, let me go back here. The transcript in Reuters, the headline is Zuckerberg resists efforts by U.S. senators commit him to regulation. Well, that tells it all right there. And from the Washington Post, the expectation around the hearing was remarkable, even by the standards of televised Capitol Hill cinema. Spectators lined up in lines off the wall of the Hart Senate building in advance, named from Senator Hart, incidentally. It's 138-seat room, and one attendee dressed as a Russian troll. Well, a lot of theater going here, no doubt about it. Appeared to be recovering from those controversial until last month revelations about Cambridge Analytica. The Federal Trade Commission is investigating potential violations, and this is this 2011 consent decree. And all of this around him, this is the House Energy and Commerce Committee. It has its own hearings scheduled for Wednesday morning. So there were several Senate committees are here, and the senators asked for details, of course, on third-party apps. This is nothing new. And as far as his trademark T-shirt, he could have worn his trademark T-shirt. Doesn't really matter very much when you're a billionaire. It's just one of the situations there. Now, the Commerce Committee was there, and the Judiciary Committee, that's where old man Grassley was. I believe he's 85 years old. And this is Facebook Stories. It's a data in rural North Carolina, where privacy debate is just beginning to catch up. This is Forest City, North Carolina. It was slow at the Fripp shop, and the manager there, Stephanie Henderson, 38, was looking at her laptop, trying to discover all of that Facebook had collected on her. And this little town here where Facebook has a data center. We have to put the picture of the data center. We'll put it up on Route 74 in the middle of a construction boom. There in that city, they chose Forest City in 2010, it'd be 8 years ago, because the town sits near the slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Is in isomal belt that provides unusual, consistent weather patterns. Facebook property is worth about $650 million today, according to municipal records. And accounts for nearly half the town's value. Wouldn't doubt that. But only 250 people work here, and in a town with a population of 3,400. Forest City has more computer servers than people. No doubt about it. And they pick these little towns, out of the way places to put their data centers. I don't know where the people are coming from. There, I suppose someplace else. They talk to somebody that owns a pizza delivery racket. And while deleting Facebook is rare, several residents spoke of pulling back from sharing intimate details they should not have shared in the first place. There, a local news picture of an ATM, a scammer that she doesn't anyway. So this is the story. This is in the Washington Post, and I think members of Congress can't possibly regulate Facebook. They don't understand it. Now, this is where the monopoly media here, and you have to understand the Washington Post is owned by Amazon. So in other words, you have a little bit of a vicious circle here, and this is by Margaret Sullivan. Senators in Facebook founders spoke different languages. There's no similar simultaneous translation. Born before the digital age took place, and this is where they talk about his age here. It doesn't matter of the age. It matters of the situation that people are put into. A large percentage of people that are past 60 are on Facebook. Granted, Grassley, he's 85. Orrin Hatch, of course, Orrin Hatch is retired. He's 84. It doesn't really matter. He's on his way out the door. Meanwhile, Facebook couldn't be more powerful in our society. No doubt about this, because it's making itself powerful, sort of like, as one person called it, cotton candy. Founded at his dorm room at Harvard. Well, he left Harvard and the dorm room behind. This was Zuckerberg. Facebook, he said, is an idealistic and optimistic company. That I would debate. I would debate the optimism involved there. There's some pessimism. Idealistic, I doubt it. An idealistic company does not go in the ad business. And this is one of the things that something needs to be done about. The meaningful self-regulation is laughable. But unfortunately, so is the idea that Congress can manage the job. Now, this is interesting. This is Sullivan here. She's the media columnist. She used to be at the New York Times. And what was she? The chief editor of the Buffalo News. She just stayed in Buffalo. That is out of the way place. Anyway, let's do the sports here. And we'll get the scores. The NBA is going to playoff city here very short. I believe this is the last day, Wednesday, of the regular NBA season, if you can believe that. But nonetheless, yes, Wednesday, the matchups, the Knicks at the Cavaliers, the Cavs could secure the number 3 seed with a win and a Philly loss. The Raptors at the Heat. The Heat will make them no worse than number 7. The Wizards at the Magic. In other words, virtually everybody gets in the playoffs. Would wind up number 8, depending on Miami's win. The Bucks at the Sixers. The Bucks jump to number 6 with a win. Number 7 if they lose. So in other words, it doesn't matter. Nuggets and T-Wolves. One of these characters will go home. And the Spurs and Pelicans. Both teams have landed anyway from 4-8 to Grizzlies. And Thunder with a win. OKC will be no worse than number 6. In other words, everybody's getting in there. The Jazz at the Trailblazers. Number 3 seed in the West is on time. Well, you can basically forget that. And we'll go and give the scores. What happens if 6 and 8 seeds are still tossed up amongst Washington, Miami, and Milwaukee? And it's a little complicated with the win. The Wizards temporarily prevent themselves from dropping to number 8, facing the Raptors in the first round. If the Wizards win against the Magic, then the Heat lose it to the Raptors on Wednesday. Let's see. The Wizards would win the number 7 seed, meaning a playoff matchup with the Celtics instead of with the Raptors, and so forth and so on. We'll go back to kind of unravel this situation as we go. Nonetheless, the Hornets were at the Pacers. It was Hornets 119 to 93. The 76ers were at the Hawks. 76ers 121 to 113. The Celtics were in Washington. Wizards 113 to 101. The Suns were in Dallas. Suns 124 to 97. And the Warriors were at the Jazz. Jazz 119 to 179. And the Rockets were in Los Angeles. And they rocketed on 105 to 99. That is the NBA. And we'll just jump back to Major League Hockey. 3 games last night. Oh, no, excuse me, that's tonight. Sorry about that. I said last night. Let me see what was on Tuesday. I don't know why we're on Wednesday here. There'll be 3 games tonight. We did this the other night. I'm not certain what with the NBA, the NHL. I'm sorry. I think we had no games. Yeah. Okay. To something we know, Major League Baseball. The Rays were at the White Sox in Chicago. Rays 6-5. The Pirates were at the Cubs. Cubs lose 8-5 on this one. The loser was Chatwood. The Tigers and Cleveland. Cleveland 2-1. The Yankees and Red Sox in Fenway. It was all Red Sox 14-1 there. Mr. Sale was the winner. The Blue Jays and Orioles in Camden Yard. It was Blue Jays 2-1. Close contest there. Atlanta and the Nationals. It was Nationals 4-1. And the winner there was Strasburg. Anyway, the Reds and Phillies in the city of brotherly love, 6-1 Phillies. The Mets and Marlins in Florida. It was Mets 8-6. Mets are winning quite a few games lately. The Angels and Rangers in Texas. It was all Angels 11-1 there. No doubt Mr. Autry is looking down and smiling. The Twins won a game in the cold, 4-1 over the Astros. In 11, the Brewers and Cardinals in St. Louis. Cards pulled us out 5-3. And the Mariners and Royals in Kansas City. It was Mariners 8-3. The Padres and Rockies in the Mile High City. It was Padres 5-2. The Athletics and Dodgers. Dodgers finally won one, shutting out the Athletics. The D-backs and Giants, a game we tuned into. It was a very, very good game. Mr. Strickland was the winner. Giants 5-4. De La Rosa was a loser in that game. And that does it for sports. And our episode here, Zuckerberg's wasted day. All we can say about that. Good day.